Hey guys, today I am honored to have President of American Atheists, Nick Fish, joining us. Nick, can you tell us a little bit about what you do at American Atheists? Do you just run the place? What does American Atheists do?
Yeah, I just kind of sit around and make sure everybody's doing their job. No, American Atheists is an organization with a really long, fantastic history dating back to the early 1960s. The founder of American Atheists, Madalyn Murray O'Hair, was one of the people who helped get mandatory compulsory prayer out of public schools. I've been with the organization for about 12 years now, working in a variety of roles, but we have a really fantastic team that works on litigation, state policy, federal policy, but also a lot of data work and helping understand atheists and non-religious people, helping support atheist communities, building really strong, thriving spaces to be atheists and not have to worry about, facing discrimination or stigma in whatever group it is that they're a part of, and so giving them the resources to be to really flex a little bit as atheists and have a place in our communities.
So, speaking of discrimination against non-religious Americans, we need to talk about Project 2025 and also its crossover with Agenda 47, the official Republican or Trump policy for 2024-2025. Can you tell us what Project 2025 actually is for people who don't know?
Yeah, so Project 2025 is essentially a blueprint for, and this is what it's written in the document itself, a blueprint for a conservative future president, hypothetical future president, who knows who that might be. Item by item, it's essentially both as I said, a blueprint, a roadmap, but also a wish list for some of the most extreme policies out there that the white Christian nationalist movement has been pushing for the better part of 60, 70 years. These are items that, range from anything like completely destroying and gutting the administrative state, making it much harder for federal agencies to protect clean water, reduce gun violence, ensure access to reproductive care or health care in general, to things like gutting the Civil Rights Act, making it so that religious entities can ignore the civil rights law, civil rights protections for, not just on the basis of religion, but on the basis of LGBTQ status, racial discrimination, a whole host of things. And it goes even further, obviously. I mean, it's literally every conceivable terrible policy you could imagine wrapped up into one package. And so when we talk about this, I think it's important to say, that this isn't some partisan thing. American Atheists is a nonpartisan organization, but this has an ideology behind it. It has an ideological motivation, and that core ideology that's at root here is white Christian nationalism. And I think it's important to remember that this isn't just an atheist issue or a progressive issue or whatnot. This is a really, really extreme agenda that they've laid out here. That the more everyday Americans read about it, hear about it, the more they're horrified and appalled at what's in those pages.
Yeah, I want to make sure before we get into this to say that it's not just atheists or non-religious people that would be negatively affected if the policies we're talking about in this document were enacted or even just provided inspiration for legislation. It's also many religious people, many diverse people groups that are advocating against this kind of thing, because it's really what it is not trying to single out one specific group of people and cast aspersions on them, oppress them. It is elevating one specific group of people and trying to kind of denigrate everybody else, which is why I think so many people across the religious spectrum have kind of joined the fight against this.
Yeah.
Luckily, there are Christians out there who themselves work very hard to oppose Christian nationalism. One such Christian is journalist and author Tim Alberta, author of the excellent book, The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory, American Evangelicals in an Age of Extremism. He exposes Christian nationalism for what it is, a cynical grab for power. You can easily get the key ideas in this book in just 16 minutes by reading or listening to the excellent Blink found on Blinkist, this video sponsor. The Blinkist app helps you understand the most important things from over 6,600 nonfiction books and podcasts in just 15 minutes. Their production quality is great and provides you a major boost in productivity. The Blinkist app also lets you create spaces with your friends where you can add, share, and recommend titles from the Blinkist library all in one place. Even your friends without a Blinkist premium subscription can access all titles in the space. So, give Blinkist a try. Get a 7-day free trial and 40% off Blinkist annual premium just by clicking my link in the description below or scanning the QR code. Thanks, Blinkist. So you and American Atheists have been very vocal specifically against religious conservative efforts to, let's say, reform the educational system in a way that favors religious education. I'm wondering if we would see a continuation of that under Project 2025.
Yeah, and it's not just a favoring of religious education. It's a wholesale gutting, and kneecapping of the American public education system. Like, to be clear, it's not just creating exemptions or allowances for religious education systems, though those are also in there. It's taking things like what's happening in Arizona, where they created from whole cloth this voucher scheme that was roundly rejected by taxpayers and voters in Arizona, and then turned around and created by the legislature, and is bankrupting the state. And I don't mean just the state's education budget. I mean the entire state. There are no cost controls. The costs are spiraling out of control in Arizona to the point where they're facing a multi-billion-dollar shortfall because they're giving money, allowing people to go to private school, to pay for people to go to private school who are already going to private school. These are rich families who don't need the extra money, taking it out of the pockets of people who are in public school, taking it out of the pockets of people who need food assistance or any type of other program to pay for rich families to send their kids to overwhelmingly religious schools. And they want to nationalize that program. That's what this is all about. This is as I said, it's a wish list. It's an agenda that dates back not to 10 years ago. This isn't a Trumpy thing. This dates back all the way to the earliest days of the opposition to the civil rights era, where groups set up explicitly to oppose public education because public education was integrated. And they created these segregation academies, essentially, to allow people to not have to send their kids to integrated schools. And so when we talk about this in the context of the white Christian nationalist movement, that's why it's so important. That's why we really emphasize the white Christian nationalist part of this, that it's not just Christians, it's not just, all parts of those are included in this. The racism, the decades of racism, the decades of opposition to government that functions, that does anything to help people, and again, a view in the supremacy and the primacy of a particular form of Christianity in American life. That's what this agenda is all about. And so it completely guts the public education system, gets rid of the Department of Education, gets rid of the department's ability to enforce civil rights laws, creates loopholes and exemptions for even existing private schools and public schools, allowing them to discriminate on the basis of basically anything that they want, especially if they have a religious reason. It allows public schools, or actually mandates that public schools no longer protect the rights of LGBTQ young people. It includes things like a categorical ban on government employees from using a person's preferred name if it doesn't align with what's on their birth certificate. My name is Nicholas. No one calls me Nicholas. I mean, does that extend here? Who knows? I mean, the stuff is, even though it's written by a think tank, is remarkably sloppy and overbroad and grandiose. And people look at it for about 5 seconds and say, well, this is really extreme. This is really over the top. What does this even mean? The answer is they don't care. It's about retribution. It's about punishing, LGBT people, punishing teachers. They want to jail librarians. They want to classify things like, medically accurate sex ed as pornography, and then throw those people in jail. People who are teaching sex ed, they want to throw them in jail. They want to throw librarians, they want to classify librarians as sex offenders. And I wish I was making that up. It's on page 5 of the document. You can look at it. It says anyone who produces or distributes pornography, defined as, overly broad, anything involving any sort of sexual content or sex education or anything like that, as sex offenders. And they want to shutter any library that would dare stock any type of book or things like that. So when you hear things like, oh, they want to ban pornography, it's not about banning pornography as pornography. It's about classifying this whole range of speech as pornography, so that they can shut it down and ban it that way. So it's bonkers. And I mean, that's what's on page 5 is we should be jailing librarians. Imagine what's buried on page 700 of this document. It's 900 and some odd page document.
Yeah, I want to talk about how this might overlap with the official stated Republican platform for the next presidential campaign. a potential Trump presidency would have something that they're calling universal school choice. I'll just read a section taken from the official platform. Universal school choice. Republicans believe families should be empowered to choose the best education for their children. We support universal school choice in every state in America. We will expand 529 education savings accounts and support homeschooling families equally. So this sounds to someone who maybe isn't, maybe who is more blissfully ignorant of what's going on here.
Who's not horrified immediately, yeah.
Yeah, this is about people being free to choose what kind of education they want and being able to afford it. You know, I was homeschooled, and that was probably the best choice for me as someone that has a chronic illness and frankly could not go to school most days.
Right.
But I'm not so sure that based on what we know from Project 2025 and what we've seen from school voucher programs kind of gutting public education, and the fact that the part of Agenda 47 is doing away with the Department of Education entirely, that we're really just talking about choice. What are we talking about here? What's the subtext?
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear. People already have the choice for all of these things. People have the option of picking if private school or homeschooling is best for their families. They already have that right. We sort of have these carve-outs already for a lot of this, and we can get into a state-by-state level of that if you want to learn a little bit more about some of the rules around homeschooling and the oversight that's there. It's woefully inadequate in most states. American Atheists does an annual report called The State of the Secular States. You can learn more about that on our website, atheists.org. We dive in on what the requirements are for homeschooling, for private schooling. And the answer, I think, again, shocks a lot of people that for overwhelming majority of states, the rules are far too lax. In some states, people don't have to have any training at all in order to homeschool their children. In many states, most states, homeschooled kids don't have to pass any sort of standardized tests. They don't have to check to make sure, are you getting an education that will help you advance in the future? And that's the case as well in, this isn't just a red state problem. Even in the state of New York, this has been happening over and over and over again. In New York City, where religious, ultra-Orthodox Jewish schools, yeshivas, are not fulfilling the state constitution's obligation to make sure that every student has very basic, and by basic I mean, can you do arithmetic, can you speak and write English, requirements to make sure that kids, if they choose to leave this community eventually in their lives, have a pathway out. And what they're talking about in Project 2025 and Agenda 47 is reducing that even further and subsidizing it even further with tax dollars. The problem is not that people are being crushed under the thumb of an over-regulatory, burdensome federal agency. It's that kids are being denied opportunities to get a good education, to get a quality education that helps them get ahead in life.
I want to talk about religion in public schools because in Project 2025 and Agenda 47, I'm seeing some overlap on the subject of what they're calling freedom to pray. Mm-hmm. So I'll read this from Agenda 47, which I'll remind you is actually the official stated Republican platform for the next potential Trump presidency. Freedom to pray. Republicans will champion the First Amendment right to pray and read the Bible in school and stand up to those who violate religious freedoms for American students. So I've read a little bit of this, and nowhere am I seeing that it's stating this is for teachers to be able to read the Bible. This is for teachers to be able to pray. It's kind of all around students being allowed to read the Bible and pray privately or with a group of students, not during class times, like something at lunch or recess.
Right.
I'm not aware that that's actually illegal or that anyone has ever come for that kind of right. In Project 2025, we see kind of more explicit statements about defending against Christian persecution and teaching a Judeo-Christian ethic in schools.
Right.
What's the subtext here behind this freedom to pray thing?
Yeah, I mean, the subtext is that they're lying. The subtext is that they're trying to claim some sort of, persecution complex here. To be clear, and I'm saying this as president of American Atheists, we have no problem with students engaging in private religious practice. That you have that right, you have had that right. There's nothing that stops that. The issue we have is when teachers, which are government employees, are picking and choosing and teaching or praying with students in a devotional way, a way that gives the imprimatur of the government to a religious perspective. Personally, I don't think that we want government telling us this is the correct religion. I seem to recall a part of the First Amendment that's in there about, respecting an establishment of religion. I don't think there's anything more clearly respecting an establishment of religion than a teacher who has authority over students, over young people who are, listen to their teachers, who are told, listen to what your teacher says, follow their instructions, believe what they're telling you in class. I don't think that anybody wants a teacher, a government employee, overriding the beliefs of our families. I don't think that we want any teacher instructing parents, overriding what a parent says on matters of religion. And that's what this agenda does. It's not a religious freedom agenda. It's a religious supremacy agenda. That's what they want, because, they talk about quote unquote Judeo-Christian values, or, how there's this Judeo-Christian foundation. That Judeo part of this is doing some heavy lifting. That is the world's largest fig leaf, to cover up a Christian supremacist ideology. I don't know any Jews that look at this and go, oh yeah, I recognize my religion in this. No, like literally every Jewish person is like, no, this has nothing to do with us. Keep us out of this. And so whenever you see anyone talk about, oh, we're going to protect the right to pray, like, well, whose right exactly to pray are we talking about here? Because the right of students to pray, we're good, already protected. We don't need to do anything further. We got that.
So I want to keep with the protecting religious rights and religious freedom theme here. In Project 2025, one proposed policy is an executive order to protect religious employers and employees' abilities to, and I'm quoting here, run their business according to their religious beliefs, non-discrimination laws notwithstanding, and, quote, make employment decisions based on religion regardless of non-discrimination laws. Do you see this affecting non-religious Americans?
I see this affecting all Americans. I see this impacting, women who want to work outside the home, and, you're trying to get a job at a Taco Bell that's owned by an extreme religious person who said, I genuinely don't believe that women should be able to work outside the home. Is that person now able to discriminate? Well, according to this, yes. If you have somebody who said, I really don't think the races should mix because it's against the Bible. I mean, this is well-settled law dating from the late 1960s, early 1970s, that you can't discriminate on the basis of race or gender on the basis of religion. That your religious rights do not trump the right of all Americans to access public accommodations. Sorry. It doesn't trump the right of all Americans to access employment that they're qualified for, and not be discriminated against for, BS reasons. That's what we're talking about here. And what they're wanting to do is create this trump card, pardon the expression, for religion. This allowing religion to supersede any law, supersede any constitutional right for another person, and make it a sort of super right. And I think, again, that's really extreme, and it's not hypothetical. I mean, these are all sorts of discrimination that were attempted in the earliest days of the civil rights era, that the Supreme Court struck down, that these laws were created explicitly to stop, and they want to drag us back. They want to drag us back to an era before the civil rights era. We're talking about 1950s, 1940s, 1930s. Like, that's the type of discrimination that they seem to want to create, as long as you have a religious justification for it. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but a whole lot of discrimination is in fact justified with religious doctrine. It sort of creates an off-ramp for people to say, well, it's not me that thinks this, it's God. So who am I to argue, right? And so that's what they're wanting to solidify, to put into our public policy is a general exemption for anybody who has a religious belief that opposes anything. And it's going to affect everybody. It's going to affect your ability to, go to a restaurant. It's going to affect our loved ones' ability to get a job. It would affect our ability to stay in a hotel, any number of things. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. That's what these laws are intended to stop, and they want to blow a, religion-sized hole in all of these laws.
What would you say to my viewers who might say, oh, well, actually, the head of Project 2025 and the Heritage Foundation has actually stepped down from the project. Trump has scorned this and said that, oh, this is hurting my chances of election. I don't like you guys. I don't know anything about it. Yep. And so you really should only look at the official stated Republican or Trump platform. Why would we still be talking about Project 2025 if this is the case?
Yeah, I mean, when Paul Dans stepped down, what they said wasn't, oh my gosh, oops, we were wrong, sorry about that. What they said is, okay, we're done. We've put this document out. It's out there now. We've got our database of future loyalists to stock a future administration with. We've got all of the work is done. So we're good to go. I'm going to go do this. What he actually said is, I want to direct all of my efforts to winning bigly. Direct quote. It wasn't about, oh, sorry, I've seen the light and, we got this wrong and wow, this is a tremendous overstep and we see that we're dramatically out of step with the American people. It isn't any of that. It's we built this tool for a future conservative administration to utilize. It's out there now. There's no turning back. I mean, that's what his statement says. So despite the fact that this one guy has moved on, the project is still out there. I mean, it's still a 900-page document that not just the federal government, by the way, regardless of whether or not Donald Trump wins or who wins in the upcoming election, we have 51 state legislatures that can implement different pieces of this and will implement different pieces of this. And so we have to talk about this roadmap because it's terrifying, horrifying, appalling, extreme, and we're going to need to fight it regardless of what happens in November at the federal level. The other thing, Donald Trump saying, I repudiate this, doesn't really hold water. And I don't know anything about this is like doesn't pass the smell test in any way. It's the most absurd thing he possibly could have said. His very own vice presidential pick wrote the foreword to the author of this project's book. And they changed the title of the book because it was too extreme. It sounded too much like, oh, we're going to sack the Capitol again. So they made it a little bit less extreme sounding on the title. But if you read the opening, the foreword to the book, and I encourage folks to look that up, a lot of news articles or news outlets have published the thing in total. Take a read at that. That's J.D. Vance. That's the guy who is a heartbeat away from the presidency of a 78-year-old guy from being the president. And he endorsed these proposals fully, all aboard. And so, Donald Trump saying, oh, I don't know anything about this, 6 cabinet secretaries, 4 people who were nominated as ambassadors by him, wrote or co-wrote sections of this document. 20 pages of Project 2025 were written by his deputy chief of staff when he was in the White House. More than 140 people who worked in the Trump administration had a hand in writing this. I don't think Donald Trump cares one iota about who is administering the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Health and Human Services. But you better believe that the first person on the list, if they win, is going to be, the head of the Faith Project or Religious Freedom Project at, First Patriot Liberty something nonprofit that's got an absurd name, who is hell-bent on making it possible to discriminate against LGBTQ people, against women who need reproductive care, against anyone on the basis of religion in healthcare. That's who's going to be at the top of the list staffing the Department of Health and Human Services. Someone who despises public education and has made it their career to destroy public education is going to be right at the top of the list for staffing the Department of Education. That's just a fact, and that's what happened when he won the first time, and that's what's going to happen if he wins the second time.
Yeah, that's actually something I wanted to touch on. So what I've seen, I think maybe the largest overlap that I have seen between Project 2025 and Agenda 47, and also just Trump's kind of like own rallying cry at this point at his actual rallies, at his speaking events, is that a focus of this is to reinstitute something that is called Schedule F. This was an executive order that he issued during his presidency, and basically it gives him relatively unchecked power to hire and fire civil servants, unelected federal employees, at will.
First, I will immediately reissue my 2020 executive order restoring the president's authority to remove rogue bureaucrats, and I will wield that power very aggressively.
I think a lot of people say, okay, yeah, it's pretty clear that Trump is not actually religious. This is him saying that he's a Christian is a totally cynical move for power and all these kinds of things. And so if he is the one that's able to hire and fire civil servants, there's not going to be religious discrimination, or at least discrimination based upon religious grounds. It's going to be discrimination based upon whether or not you're a Trump loyalist. I'm sure there's truth to that, but I'm wondering if you can speak to this idea that this administration would have this ability to kind of hire and fire people unchecked. Will this result in religious discrimination, even though Trump is like clearly not really a Christian?
Well, yeah, I mean, yes is the answer. It doesn't have anything to do with the president's religiosity. Joe Biden didn't stock the White House entirely with Catholics. I don't think Kamala Harris would stock the White House entirely with, co-religionists either. Donald Trump is not going to be the one hiring and firing rank and file civil service employees who are staffing offices like the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Health and Human Services. It's the Secretary of Health and Human Services. It's the head of the Office of Civil Rights who are, again, going to be plucked from Alliance Defending Freedom or whatever other right-wing Christian nationalist, white Christian nationalist group. They're the ones that are going to be delegated the authority to hire and fire and stock their offices. And so if you think Donald Trump's personal religiosity has anything to do with this, I think you're gravely mistaken. I don't know what's in Donald Trump's heart or mind. It doesn't matter. What he's done is surround himself with groups of people who see him as somehow ordained by God, people who look to him as some sort of religious icon, who use really disturbing rhetoric around whether he's ordained to be president or not, or he was protected by God by, from an assassin's bullet or whatever, that's some really dark rhetoric that has some really troubling implications. Because, there can be no negotiation, there can be no good faith give and take. If you have God on your side and the other side is, a bunch of godless heathens or whatever, there's really no middle ground there. You're righteous, the other side is evil. And we see that in the rhetoric all the time. And so I'm not as worried about, is there going to be religious discrimination in hiring and firing decisions at the federal government? Well, yeah, I bet. But I'm much more worried about the intersection and the interaction between those federal employees and the people that they're supposed to serve, and the policy outcomes and the, interpretation of the Constitution that we're going to see from those people who are charged with enforcing the law. If all you're selecting for is loyalty, you're going to end up with some real bottom of the barrel people who do not have fealty to the Constitution, commitment to supporting the law and protecting the law. You're going to have people swearing a personal oath to one person, and that's not. I don't think anybody wants the people we interact with at the Social Security Administration or the people that we interact with at Veterans Affairs or anything like that. We want them to have our interests at heart, not whoever the president is. We want them to be looking out for us, not swearing personal oaths to the president. We don't have a king. Unlike in the UK, when people are sworn into office, they don't swear a personal oath to the king. Here in the US, we swear an oath to the Constitution and to the law. And I think that's the appropriate thing, and he wants to turn that on its head. And that's the overlap. There's the commonality there between Project 2025 and the official Republican Party platform. I mean, they're in lockstep on that, and it has the same outcome. Same thing for, they talk about, well, Project 2025 wants to ban abortion. Well, I don't want to ban abortion, says Donald Trump. The official platform talks about, protecting life and extending the 14th Amendment's protections to unborn children, which means a national abortion ban, which means that you can't terminate a pregnancy because it's a life from the moment of conception. And so you just need to think like one step further down to see that, again, this agenda is in lockstep, and it's just a branding problem for them.
So a final piece of overlap that I want to make sure and point out is the mentions of Marxism throughout Project 2025 and Agenda 47. Yeah, there are mentions of how Marxists have infiltrated the U.S. It refers to Marxist elites like politicians and academics, and how we must eliminate Marxist indoctrination in the educational system, in the Department of Defense. That's an example that is given in Project 2025. Now, you would know, being the president of American Atheists, better than just about anyone, that screaming Marxist is another way to scream atheist, to scream heretic, to scream someone who's not submitting to religious rule. And we kind of had an entire scare in our history in
Famously.
the mid 20th century. Yeah, famously called McCarthyism. That's a whole phenomenon that came out of that. I'm wondering, do you see like a serious resurgence of McCarthyism happening under this administration? Like, could people be suspected of being Marxists or atheists, or suspected of not being religious, and therefore they're a Marxist and therefore against the official platform? Like, what do you see happening with all this Marxist language?
Yeah, I mean, it's dehumanizing rhetoric. It's an attempt to paint your opposition, your reasonable opposition, reasonable disagreement, as somehow extreme, as foreign, as an existential threat to the nation. And these are the same people that call Joe Biden a Marxist, right? The same people that call which is hilarious. I know Marxists. They're not fans of Joe Biden, right? Like,
I was gonna say, like, I'm not a Marxist myself, but I know some people that are, and this idea that Marxists are represented in the U.S. government is like
hilarious.
Really hilarious.
Yeah, I mean yes. The short answer is this is an attempt to silence dissent. The President Trump's agenda, the party platform, calls for expelling anti-government protesters. And I think he says like pro-Hamas, anti-American protesters, expelling them, kicking them out of the country.
He even extends this to socialists.
Yeah.
Specifically in Agenda 47, it says that socialists would not be allowed into the country.
Right.
Now, I'm asked all the time if I'm a socialist because I'm an atheist.
Right. And they have nothing to do with
happen?
each other, right? I mean, there are atheists who are extremely progressive, extremely liberal Marxists. There are atheists who are right in the center of American politics. There are atheists who are conservatives. Like, atheism has almost nothing to do. But yes, I will absolutely concede that if you survey atheists, we tend to be further left of center, the furthest left of center of any religious demographic in the United States. But they're not necessarily linked hand in hand, right? And so, this is an attack on free speech. It's an attack on our ability to dissent within our government, whether it's dissenting on policy issues, whether it's dissenting on religious issues, or whether it's dissenting on, the role of government in our lives, or what sort of government we want, and, to just push back on that. It's an attempt to push those people out, say that they're unworthy of basic human rights, basic civil rights, basic ability to participate in our, multiracial, multi-belief democracy. And that's really scary. I don't think any of us, I certainly wouldn't, American Atheists would never say that, if you're religious, that you're not allowed to participate in government or anything like that. We want you to have a secular justification for things. But we don't say, religious people are unqualified to be members of the government. Now, the opposite isn't true. We're told all the time that, if you're not religious, you're not qualified to be a leader in America. I mean, I remember back in 2016, Ted Cruz said something like this. Marco Rubio has said things like this. Everybody remember Rick Santorum? Man, talk about a blast from the past. Like, these are people who said these things in so few words, that atheists should not be allowed to hold office. And this harkens back to a really dark time in American politics. A number of states still have in their state constitutions bans on atheists holding office. Now, those bans aren't enforceable now, but we've seen what happens when civil rights protections get rolled back, that these zombie laws suddenly are relevant again. Abortion bans dating back to the late 19th century are now enforceable again, right? So I don't want to say never, I think it calls back to a really, really dark period in American history that is ascendant, unfortunately, and that I think that this could I see this happening again? Yeah. And do I think that the courts are going to save us? No. I think it's on us to, engage in the dirty business of politics.
Yeah, if you were to give a specific piece of practical advice to my viewers about how they, as secular and actually religious folks, how could they get involved to prevent something like this from actually happening at any level? We've talked about how this isn't just a Trump agenda. This isn't just talking about higher courts. This is talking about government in all its instantiations. So how could my audience get involved to try to keep this from happening?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing that folks can do is volunteer your time, volunteer if you don't have time, volunteer your money. If you don't have money or time, find another way to just take one action. Make it attainable, make it achievable. You're not going to save the world, on your own, right? This is a team effort. This is the thing that takes years to build up systems, to build up structures. Get involved at whatever level you can. Find a civic group near you that you agree with on one issue and show up. And recognize that these fights, the struggle is not fought every 4 years. It's not every 2 years. It's not even once a year. It's constant. And it takes all of us working to shore up our institutions, get more engaged with those institutions, whether it's something as simple as voter registration, getting out and making sure that people are registered to vote. Now, atheists are the single most likely religious demographic to be engaged in politics. So to the extent that anyone's an atheist, I'm preaching to the choir. But there are a lot of people who are, non-religious, people who are just sort of like, I don't care, who have disengaged from a lot of civic institutions. So they've disengaged from religious institutions, they've disengaged and they distrust political institutions, media, a whole range of things. And I get it, because a lot of those institutions feel very disconnected from us. They don't feel like they're serving us. But we live in a participatory democracy where we can build new things, where it relies on our involvement in sort of changing changing the situation around us. And the best thing we can do is demonstrate that we have a commitment to improving this world as we found it and leaving it better for the next generation. For those of us that are non-religious, who are atheists or humanists or whichever label you use, we've got to put our money where our mouth is, where if we believe that this is the one life we have to live, then it's our obligation to live that life fully and live that life in such a way that we're leaving behind something better. And so that's what I always encourage people to do. It can be something as simple as showing up to your city council meeting or showing up to your school board meeting and speaking at that 30-second block, or showing up and supporting somebody who is going to speak. Signing up for email alerts and making one phone call a week to a member of Congress, to your school board member, to your local mayor, whoever it is. Those little acts of involvement, of engagement, are what change people's minds, are what show elected officials that we're serious about the things that we care about, that we're committed to investing in building something better for ourselves and for the future. I know it's hard. I don't want to pretend for 1 second that it's not. But at the same time, change is possible. It is possible for us to create a better world for the future and not just stop the bad stuff from happening, but actually advance things in a positive direction.
Well, on that note, I appreciate you showing up to talk to us about this today. And where can people find out more about American Atheists and what you guys are up to and support you?
Folks can go onto our website, atheists.org, best place. We'll find all of our links, all of our signups, all of our donation things there. Best way to support us in the lead up to this is become a monthly donor, $5 a month, something like that. Really helps us out, allows us to plan for the future. Check out what we're up to. We've got a lot of great resources there. And it's, as always, good to see you. Good to chat with you.